smoke and fire and everything. The back of the C-130 is going to drop, and this car is just going to launch out of the back of the airplane, and come down the straightaway, right. And boom,
Bobby Akin, thanks so much for joining us. This is The Creative Drive. As you know, we're in the Racer Studio, the podcast that sheds light on creators and the creative aspect of the industry. Bobby, thanks for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. Pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So, Bobby, you are a colleague and also a seasoned television, motorsport executive. I mean, you've done a lot of things in your career. Can you sort of give us an introduction of yourself?
Well, I have been doing this for a long time, and I grew up in a racing family. My dad was a driver and a team owner, and ran a very successful team in IMSA. Arguably one of the most photographed cars of all time in the Coca-Cola Porsche colors. And so I kind of grew up in this business and started driving like a lot of sons of drivers do. And I raced on a pretty serious level for 9 years or so. And but the reality was I wasn't that good. And so I ended up knowing a guy who his name was Roger Warner, and he was president of ESPN at the time. Knew him from car racing, and he had left ESPN, and he called me one day and said, "Hey, I've got this idea, and I need somebody that really knows motorsport from the inside, and I'm wondering if you might be interested in coming into the TV business." And I didn't know anything about the TV business. And he said, "Well, don't worry about that. Just come talk to me." And so I came out to California from New York and said, "Okay, we'll give it a try." And we started working on the Speedvision project in 1994, I guess, and launched in 96. And that started it all.
So you were a race car driver up until that point, and you had no experience in media at all. And so what was your first job at Speedvision? What were you tasked to do?
Well, I think I had experience without not knowing I had experience. When you're a driver, especially a young driver that doesn't have piles of money and you're always trying to sell and do sponsorship deals, and you knew all the players, right? My dad was very involved with Porsche, and so I knew all the players at Porsche, mainly Bob Carlson, who was the head of PR and motorsport at the time. And we were friends with a lot of car people. It's a very small community, as you know. Yeah. And so, Eric Wensberg, who was the head of M brand for BMW, lived not far from us. And Paul Newman, the actor, was a dear friend of ours, and he knew a bunch of people. And so it was that kind of coming together of my experiences of being around motorsport, racetracks, trying to get sponsors, trying to sell value in motorsport. I've been doing that since I was 15.
Right.
And so making the transition was not that difficult.
What were the earlier days at Speedvision like? Was it crazy, or did you guys have everything, dialed in? What was it like?
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. I think I was the fourth or fifth person in the building. But I was definitely the junior guy, and Roger and his team were seasoned. And I mean, he essentially built ESPN. So that group was really running the business of it. I was really tasked with getting more involved with the sanctioning bodies, convincing sanctioning bodies and racing organizations that we were launching this network, and we were going to be a viable place for a lot of series that really didn't have television at the time.
Right.
I mean, Trans Am and IMSA, they had some races on TV, but not a lot. And so I was really spending my time, a lot of it, at racetracks. I think for the first couple years of Speedvision, I was doing 54 to 58 race weekends a year. Man, there's only 52 weeks in a year, right? So I would leave on a Tuesday and fly to Indy and be in Indy on Wednesday and Thursday, and then fly to Daytona and be in Daytona through Sunday, and then fly back Sunday night and do it all again the next week. And so it was really building those relationships with the racing organizations, the teams, and very important, the sponsors.
Yeah.
I remember the first sale, actually, is just kind of coming back to me now. I had started working with Roger. We hadn't launched the network yet. We had a 3 or 4 page Word document as a pitch deck. And I flew to Reno, Nevada, where I met with a very young Joel Iwanek, who was the new CMO for Porsche Cars North America. Porsche was based in Reno back then, not in Atlanta. And so I met Joel and Bob Carlson, again, the Porsche PR guy and motorsport guy, put us together. And I had asked them for a 1-year commitment for $50,000 and we were going to do various things for that $50,000. And we went through the theme of the network. We went through the business plan of what we were going to do. And I'll never forget it. Joel Iwanek pulled out his pen and said, "Let me tell you what I'm going to do." And he crossed out the 50 grand. He wrote down 3-year deal for $350,000 fixed.
Okay.
And you're going to carry the Porsche Carrera Cup series and any other Porsche programming that we want to put on the air within reason. And we're going to keep that number of 350,000 fixed for at least 3 years. And I said, okay, that sounds good to me.
Right.
And I walked back into the office and said, all right, guys, it's that easy. We just got 350 grand. It wasn't that easy for the rest of them, but that was the first sale that Speedvision ever did, was with Porsche.
Wow, that's cool. So that involved not just ads, but like, brand, basically what we now call like branded content and like features, right, of Porsche, and obviously carrying their races.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the onset, that was, I guess, the best way. Racing is branded content,
right?
Right. I mean, the Toyotas, the Porsches, all these, they're not out there doing it because they just love the race. They're out there to promote their brand, right? And to learn something, for sure. But yeah, we learned early on. I mean, programming a network 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's really expensive and not easy. And frankly, we didn't have the budget to do it. We were relying on suppliers giving us programming that was either on a barter basis, where they kept some spots and we kept some spots. We did a fair amount of that. But the idea of creating what I call mutually relevant programming, programming that worked for our audience as editorial, if you will, of it looked good. It felt like the network produced it. It was produced by the network, but we had funding from partners to create that content, whether that was racing series, like the Porsche Cup. We did some other things with BMW. And that was how we kind of got enough tonnage of content, frankly, to run the network.
Yeah. I mean, without your racing experience, though, it probably would have been impossible to do your job then.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big help to me that I knew all the ins and outs of motorsport. I knew the right people to talk to, you know, and then whether that was Leo Mel at Goodyear or you know, the head of BMW Motorsport, and they'd pick up the phone. And you know, when I had an idea of, hey, what if we did uh, a documentary on the history of M?
Mhm.
Let's do that show. Would our audience want to hear that? Absolutely. Does BMW want to promote the M brand? It wasn't as big as it is today back then. So it was a win-win situation where we were creating this content that really our audience loved
Mhm.
and gave our clients value in a way that they never had before. There wasn't an internet. There wasn't a YouTube.
Yeah.
There wasn't the ways there is today to get your message out in an authentic way.
Right. That was the only way to do it back then. It wasn't a world where everyone had a phone and you can invite influencers and creators, you know, to the track like you can today.
No, exactly right. You know, we one funny story was we had a big sales meeting that was scheduled for, I don't know, call it February 15th. And it was 4 months before. Roger Warner had said, hey, in addition to a sales meeting, we're having a board meeting the same day. So some of the board is going to come in to the sales meeting. And I want some of the top guys to get up and talk about something new that they're going to be doing for the channel going forward. And in my typical fashion, I put it off and put it off and put it off, and was on the plane on the way to Connecticut from LA where the meeting was going to be, and started jotting some things down. And then I got tired of it, put it off, and literally I'm in the shower in the morning of the meeting, and the idea comes to me. You know, I'd been reading Road and Track magazine on the plane, and every issue of Road and Track had a road test of a car. And I said, you know, why don't we do a road test for television? And the manufacturers will fund it. And as long as they fund it, we'll keep all the advertising. That's how we'll make some money, because we don't have to produce a show again for that 30 minutes, but it'll be a show about a cool car. And so I went into the office and I got one of the assistants to help me put together a slideshow. And at 2:00, I went live with, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create these shows. We're going to call them test drives. The manufacturers are going to pay to produce them. We're going to keep all the inventory, and it's going to be great. And this is how we're going to make a whole lot of money. And there was silence in the room. And people's hand raised, well, you know, you're not going to be able to do that, and they're not going to really want to pay. And I basically made a bet, and I said, I guarantee you that we'll sell 5 of these and in the next 30 days or something. And made a couple of phone calls. And after all the years of doing test drive shows with Tommy Kendall and as our host, I think we ended up doing 97, almost 100 shows over the span of Speedvision.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. No, that's probably like the first, you know, video, you know, TV, road, you know, test show, right? That's ever been done.
I don't want to stake that claim, but I don't remember one before. So
yeah,
it was, you know, it ended up being a great, and by the way, on a personal note, we had so much fun traveling the world, with Tommy and our production team. And we had amazing guests, from Patrick Dempsey to Adam Carolla to, I mean, I can't, Leno, all the heads of all the car companies, Ralph Shields and all those guys. We had just a blast playing with cars for 100 shows.
Right. What do you think of all the YouTube, you know, car test content that's out there these days, though?
I think there's some great ones. And it's changed the dynamic of the business, right? Everybody originally I think Chris Harris was one of the first ones that really started knocking the laces off the ball. And we actually had him as a guest on a test drive show early on. It was a Land Rover, I forget which one, test drive show that Chris did. And so look, it's really an amazing thing that you see these people come in, creators doing these shows, and the views they get, and it's really unbelievable how many people are consuming that content. And it just goes to show you that there's so much relevance, and people are just still so into the things I love, cars, and consuming the content, and it warms my heart. Yeah. It changes my dynamic, right? The business is different, right, and harder. But at the base of it, I love telling stories, and that's really what I think I am more than anything else, is a storyteller and a problem solver for automotive clients, but with all the avenues that are out there, it continues to evolve and be very interesting.
I think that's kind of the problem that we're trying to solve here at Racer, right? So you run the studio, and I run the creator network, and there's a very new merging of the studio and the media, the Racer media part of the business, to utilizing creators to get the brand message out. So I think we're doing something pretty unique here. But how does your approach to content, as you mentioned, you said, it makes your job a little bit difficult, but how do you think creators could help amplify the brand message?
Well, when I say it makes my job more difficult, I'm really talking about it, back to the broadcast days, right? We were the only one doing this. And so working with manufacturers and creating the content and getting eyeballs was we were really the only group in town that was doing that back then. Now it's everywhere. But I think bringing together some of the best creators, and giving them a forum and a voice and a place that gets their content out there, with a home, really, right? And I think that's something that Racer in our world of motorsport can do better than anybody else. And there is this reality that while the broadcast days are definitely over and that ship has sailed, there is so much noise now. That's the other side of the equation, right? That there's so many. You pull up, you want a video on a Mustang, you get 400,000, guys who have posted videos out there, right? Where I think we can help creators. This is your world more than anything else, but where we can help creators in our world is to provide that home and that credibility of Racer that's been doing this for a long time, and is in my humble opinion the Bible of motorsport. Is give them a place to kind of stand out and get away from all the noise, because to be with us, you got to be enough of a class act to be a part of our brand, right? And so I really do believe that meeting of what Racer has to offer and what the creators that we're working with are going to do is really going to be amazing.
I can't wait to show some of the things that we're working on. But let's just backtrack a little bit. You were being very humble about your racing career. So, tell us about some of the, achievements that that you've had in victories? I mean, you're no slouch.
Well, yeah, I mean, but when I said I wasn't that good, right? You want to race at the top end of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not easy, right? I had some successes. I did a lot of driving with Porsche during the 944 program. I won a bunch of races in the, what was then the Firehawk series, which was now I guess the Michelin Pilot Cup series. I was second in the championship, missed it by 5 points. I still hate that guy. But Jeff Perner, who is still involved with Porsche driving experience. Yeah, I won the 24-hour Daytona the year before they started giving watches away. But
you didn't get a Rolex?
No, I didn't get a Rolex. I work with Rolex a lot, and they're great people. But it was I don't know, the Sunbank 24 or whatever it was. So no, I had an amazing time racing, and I tested with some big teams and had a lot of fun and a lot of success. But it wasn't at the level that was going to drive me to, be running an IndyCar or Formula One or anywhere like that. It just wasn't.
So Mechanical Rabbit Racing was your father's team.
Right.
And you now have a production company
Right.
called Mechanical Rabbit Production.
Yeah. I mean, I had been after Speed Channel was shut down and what is now FS1. And they were kind of winding out of car stuff except for NASCAR. I had an opportunity to go work with Motor Trend and really kind of help them bring their video into the current century. And they had a very successful YouTube channel before I got there. But
this was late 2000s.
Yeah. And so I went to Motor Trend, was working with them on their video and content strategy. And we must have been doing something right, because Discovery came and bought it exactly for that. Right. And I knew I wasn't going to stay and work at Discovery. And so when the time was right, I left Motor Trend on a Wednesday. I signed a production deal with them on Thursday, and on Friday, my new company, Mechanical Rabbit Productions, was producing some branded content for them with Genesis on Friday. And so I've had Mechanical Rabbit open now for a little over 2 years. And we're quite busy, I'm happy to say. But that original name, came from my dad's very first racing team, which is named after kind of the old days of dog racing, where they have a mechanical rabbit that runs around the inside of the track, and the mechanical rabbit is never beaten, never passed, and always wins.
You're right.
And so that was the idea of my dad's race team back then. And so it was a fun thing for me to do, to go back to the roots of it all,
right.
With my dad and start the company with that brand.
Okay, so that's where the Mechanical Rabbit name comes from. Okay,
that's exactly right.
You've worked with, you mentioned Paul Newman, a bunch of, Adam Carolla, a bunch of celebrities, but you've recently created many features, docuseries. One of them was with Patrick Dempsey, Back on Track. Tell us a little bit about that docuseries.
Yeah, Patrick and I have been friends for a long time. He's a wonderful guy, a hell of a race driver, very much like Paul Newman. I think Patrick is a better race driver than he is an actor. And I think that's probably saying something, because he's a heck of a good actor. He and I were talking, and he said, I've really missed it. When he went and filmed the Ferrari movie, he really, he realized how much he missed, not just the driving, but the camaraderie and the sport itself, and that it was a hole in his life that he'd been away from for almost 10 years.
Right.
And he said, I think I'm going to dip my toes in, again, with Porsche announcing they were doing an endurance, single make endurance Cayman series. And it was going to be manageable, 4 races. Frankly, he was like, I want to figure out how to, offset some of the expenses. And I said to him, I said, Patrick, I'm not a sponsor guy, but I am a content guy. And I think there's a great story here. And I think we could make that valuable to some partners. And with Haggerty Media and Mobile One and Porsche, we managed to put together enough funds to create a 4-episode series that has been up on Haggerty. We just launched the final episode, the 4th episode, last week, and it tells the story of Patrick coming back, and he's got some good cast members in his world, in Patrick Long, who is just the most dynamic, amazing driver and human, frankly. Patrick did the first 3 races, the 2 of them, and were on the podium, I think, almost every time except once. And for the final race, which is a 6-hour race, they brought in Tanner Faust to join him, and another just great guy and amazing driver.
Guest of the podcast as well.
Yes, guest of the podcast. I saw that. And what was great about, the whole experience was amazing, and just seeing the bond between Dempsey and Long just warmed my heart. And it really comes through in the content. And Dempsey's approach to things are not necessarily the things that most people think about racing. It's very cerebral. He's really into meditation and stoicism, and what does that bring to the table? He's also amazingly fit. I mean, look, he won't mind me saying this. I mean, he's 58 years old. The clock is ticking. You know, he's not going to have a lot of shots to go back and do this. And he wasn't even sure if he still had the chops, if you will. So getting into that was definitely a part of our story. And, but as I said, they did really well. And it was just amazing to be a part of that whole experience with them. And Tanner, by the way, as experienced as he is, I mean, he's won, rallycross and Formula Drift and done, I don't know how many movies and including the Brad Pitt movie that's coming out. He was part of that. He's just driven everything and everywhere, right? He's never done a sanctioned sports car race in his life.
Yeah, he was telling us
and that's just amazing. And I give him a lot of props for it at this point in his career, being a guy that doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. He said, I'm all in. I'd love to do it.
Right.
And he was fast right out of the gate.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the trust between the two Patricks is pretty cool to watch in that series. It's like, oh man, these guys really, Dempsey really trusts, Patrick Long. And all the coaching, and not just the on-track coaching, but like the things that he, opens up to him about her is pretty great to watch.
Yeah, it was really special. And again, Patrick Long is just one of these very, very special people, beyond his ability as a race driver, which is, Hall of Fame, in my opinion, material, right? That he has this cerebral side to him as well that is so good at being a coach and an instructor and in racing and in life. I mean, a very personal story. My son, who was a high-level competitive swimmer, had a bad start and at a big swim meet, states, and it crushed him, and he was really down. And Pat Long called him and had a long chat with him about failure and how what that means. And it was just so cool because he didn't need to do that, and he's that kind of guy. Yeah. And my son has now a Pat Long, Porsche poster, in his room, and they still talk every once in a while.
Yeah.
So it's very cool.
Fan for life now.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. You've also recently done work with Keanu Reeves for the GR Cup as well. That was another exciting.
Yeah, I mean,
experience.
it was a trip, and I don't want to overemphasize the celebrity thing. I haven't really done much celebrity stuff, but all of a sudden it was all at once.
Yeah.
And both, by the way, Keanu, I don't know him that well, but what a just kind, good guy. What can I do to help? There's no attitude.
Right.
He showed up by himself for the first day. He shows up early. And he's on a motorcycle, his motorcycle, his Arch motorcycle, which are very impressive, by the way. And no handlers, no assistants, no anything. He's just like, hey, I'm here. Can we get started? And I'm like, all right, here we go. That's that was really fun to be a part of, and that'll be coming out soon on Toyota's platforms. And then another version of that will be going up on Fox Sports in March.
Cool. Looking forward to that for sure. Going back a little bit back and forth here, but so your dad has an award named after him, the Bob Akin Memorial Motorsports Award.
Yeah, so my dad, first of all, I had the greatest relationship with a father that I think anybody could ever have. And unfortunately, I lost him in a racing accident in Road Atlanta, which was brutal. But he was just amazing. He's my best friend. Would have been the best man at my wedding had he been around. But he was also, a beloved guy in the world of motorsports, a respected guy. He took his racing very seriously, but he was not a professional in the great sense of the word. But he did. He won Sebring twice. He raced at Le Mans 9 times, I think.
That's impressive.
And finished 4th. Which he called first in class, because back then the Rothman's factory team was 1, 2, 3, and then the next guy was 4th. That was the class winner.
Okay, yeah.
After he passed, Jim France, the president of NASCAR and also the owners of IMSA, I was honored to get a call from Jim. And they wanted to name an award after my dad and another one after Jim Truman. So the Akin Truman Award is something they give out every year, and it goes to the kind of top amateur driver of the year, and those guys get now, and it's a new thing, but they get a ticket to Le Mans.
Oh, wow, okay.
As part of that deal, which is really, really amazing. And I am just so touched and honored. It's been 20 years almost since my dad passed away, and that award and the memory of him with that is really special to me and my family. And I've gotten to know a lot of the winners, and most of them are, all the ones I know are really good guys, and they're businessmen, and they're successful, but they take their racing very seriously, and that's a testament to something my dad would have loved.
Yeah, that's great. Are you part of the selection process?
Not that's all done by IMSA and points and it's not really a voting thing. Now there is another award that is in my dad's name for the Road Racing Drivers Club. And the RDC gives an award every year to someone who's essentially a great driver, solid person involved in motorsport, but it's not their only only gig, if you will.
Mhm.
And last but not least, and I'm paraphrasing the rules, but last but not least has to be a really good guy.
Okay.
And so that award, I do participate in the selection and the voting. Bobby Rahal's on the committee, Judy Stropus, Brian Redman, Lee Diffie, and myself are on that committee. And that's given away every year on the Wednesday night before the Rolex 24 at the Road Racing Drivers Club dinner, and is a very prestigious award from the RDC.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's pretty awesome. What are your so just because going back to some of the brand stuff, which brands do you think are doing really well in terms of content marketing? Like which brands do you think are killing it right now?
I think all of our clients are killing it. If they're not doing business with us, they're out to lunch. No, I'm kidding. But
Agree.
No, I think a lot of them are doing great stuff, and I like the ones that are taking chances. I loved the GR Cup stuff that we've been involved with, and Toyota has supported. I love it. The fact that they were open to somebody like Keanu Reeves coming in, who hasn't driven anything since the celebrity race in 2009.
Yeah.
And they wanted to put all the resources into making that possible, including coaching and testing and sim. And, Keanu had to do all that in 5 days and be ready to go racing. I love stuff like that. I love when brands want to take some chances and do things a little out of the ordinary. I worked on a project a couple years back where it was Tim Kaniskis, who, by the way, he retired about 7 months ago from Stellantis Dodge, and I think yesterday announced he's coming back.
Okay.
So which is great.
Yeah.
Tim's an amazing guy and one of these kind of rebel, takes chances. And when they had said that they were going to make the last great Hemi, I got a call saying, hey, we want to do something that at a location that Dodge has roots with, maybe a little military aspect, and we want it to be just an over the top stunt.
Right.
What can you do? I said, okay, give me an hour.
Yeah.
I didn't say that, but give me some time. I'll come back. And so I came up with this idea.
Took a shower again.
I took a shower, back in the shower, do all my best work. And I came up with the original idea was we were going to fly a C-130 into Sebring, which if you've been to Sebring, it was a bomber. It was a bomber base, right. But there's still an airport next door to what is now the racetrack. And there's a wall that the airport and the racetrack share. And I seem to remember in one of my long journeys at Sebring that wall could come down. And so I said, we're going to land the C-130 at the airport. We're going to taxi it onto the front straightaway. At the far end is going to be our event with a band and all kinds of stuff going on, right. Fireworks or whatever. Right. And smoke and fire and everything. The back of the C-130 is going to drop, and this car is just going to launch out of the back of the airplane, and come down the straightaway, right. And boom, right. and checked all the boxes. Had a little military, had the stunt, had roots and roots at Sebring. They won with the Viper there, and back in the Trans Am days, they raced there. So, it had all the pieces. The one piece was that just to fly the plane was, I think, $75,000 an hour. And you had to get the plane there.
All right.
And the plane was like in Oregon.
Okay.
So this thing was, we hadn't even gotten the production team on set, and it was already out of budget.
Okay.
And so we had to rethink it. And at the same time, Dodge was working on the motor, and they wanted it to be a certain way, so they bought more time. Anyway, long story short, we ended up doing it at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and we had 5,000 or 6,000 people. We had Diplo as the band, and I got a helicopter, and we took off a quarter mile away. Everyone's watching drag racing going on at the drag strip, and we flew the helicopter flew the last Hemi dangling below. It landed at the far end of the drag strip, got off the platform, came up the wrong direction, spun around, did a burnout, and then ended up hauling ass down the straightaway. And it was epic.
Yeah.
It was the longest, probably 4 minutes of my life, because we didn't have enough money to really test it.
Right.
So we weren't sure if it was going to work. Right? And it would have been a career-ending moment. But that's Tim Kuniskis. He takes chances and makes stuff happen, and thank God he did, because it was a blast. And I think that video went over 1 million within like 3 hours.
Wow. Yeah.
It was massive.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the definition of epic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
No, that's great. So for maybe for young creators that are starting to talk to brands, what do you think they should be aware of when they're talking to brands about creating content?
That's a tough one. One, I'm older than dirt, so I don't know about young creators. No, I'm kidding. But look, I think that what I've always tried to do is it's trite, but be authentic to who you want to be, right? And do the same thing with your client, and in that find the right stories and the right content ideas that I'm not sure what the right way to say it is, but I just when I see something and it's they're faking it, and it isn't in a fun way, that it just doesn't work in my opinion, right? Yeah. So I think when you're creating content with brands, and sometimes you have to save the brand from themselves. I mean, there are things that go out there that the brands want to do that you're like, we can't do it that way, and here's why. Yeah. And sometimes you have to do it twice. You do it the way they want it, and then the way it should be done, and you show it to them, and they go, "Oh yeah, you're right." Yeah. So I guess that to me is just finding the right stories to work on with brands that are credible to you as a creator, and that still work to get the message out that the client is looking for, and finding those ways to tell those stories, and partnering with the right people to do it, and having the right team around you, right, is it's one thing for some of these creators that are single, on their own, but aligning yourself with the right people is also important. Yeah.
I think the common theme that we always seem to come back to is just how to stay authentic. I mean, it's sort of cliche, but it's really the truth. The camera doesn't lie. So when you're schlepping something that you don't believe in, or you're just not there, it shows, right? So you just have to be yourself, and you really have to understand what that brand is trying to say, right? You have to really feel that and understand that in order to create content that evolves that, that feeling.
Yeah, no. And look, I ran up, look, I've made lots of mistakes, right? But I think the biggest mistake I ever made, and I'm not going to say who the brand was. Actually, I can, because they don't exist anymore. There's a reason for that. No, I'm not going to say it. But, during our test drive run, there was one client who was, spending a lot of money with the network. And he wanted us to do a test drive on a racetrack with a car that never should be anywhere near a racetrack.
Yep.
And that wasn't this car's purpose in life. It wasn't a performance car. It wasn't anything like a performance car.
Why was it on the track?
Exactly.
There you go.
And I acquiesced.
Yeah.
We were under budget pressures. We're under, we had to hit a certain goal, and this was gonna get us there. And I tried to make it as good as we could, but it was forcing a round peg in a square hole, and the backlash was terrible.
Yeah.
And not only was it bad from the audience, but it ended up hurting the test drive franchise. People were like, wait a second, when you're doing the Audi All-Road, which was kind of an interesting, really cool car, wasn't a performance car, in the strict sense of the word, but it was a car that was new. It was interesting. It was something different that Audi had not really done before. And we put it on Laguna Seca, but we went backwards and went off-road up the side of off the racetrack and up the side of the corkscrew. That was authentic to what that car was.
Yeah.
All right. And was fun. Right. When I made that error, there were people at other brands that were like, yeah, that you guys, that was awful, and we don't want to be associated with it. So we fought through it. And I vowed at that moment that I'm not doing that again.
Right.
And, if we don't make budget, we don't make budget, we'll survive. Right. But the brand being authentic, sorry to say that word again, but being true to your brand, whatever that is, whether it was, Bobby Akin's brand or Racer or Test Drive at the time or whatever, you want to treat your brand with reverence. Right. And, I learned, a lot from my dad, and how he treated brands that he worked with. And there was no one, more dedicated to preserving their brand than Coca-Cola.
How did that deal come together?
This is funny. Yeah. Back in the day, before they had the Daytona International Speedway, this is how far back we're going.
Okay.
The Bill France Sr. put together a group of people to build the Speedway. And one of those people was a guy named Preston Root. Preston Root owned Coca-Cola bottling for like the southern section of the United States. Right. A license to print money.
Yeah.
And so Coca-Cola and NASCAR and the 500 were joined at the hip.
Right.
All right. Fast forward, Bill's gone. Current management, the way the company worked, there were two sides to the organization. There was NASCAR, and then there was ISC, who owned the tracks. And ISC did a deal for Pepsi to be the official sponsor of the Daytona 500. And Preston Root, who's still around, and his son Chapman, still in the business, still involved with the Speedway, were really angry. Right. And I mean really angry.
Really?
And if you know kind of the racing calendar, the first race of the year at Daytona is the 24-hour.
Yeah.
And Preston Root said, I want a Coca-Cola car in the 24-hour.
Okay.
And someone said, well, you should call Bob Akin. He's a good guy.
Right.
So the phone rings, my dad's office.
Right.
Hey, I'm Preston Root. I want to sponsor your race car. You don't get those calls very often,
No.
right? So
Incoming.
yeah.
Right.
It happened twice. Ralph Lauren was the other one.
Oh, wow.
My dad hung up on him. So they did a deal, and my dad said, well, look, and I don't remember what the money was, but it was like 50 or 60,000 bucks. And he said, and for another 20, I'll throw in Sebring, which is right up the road.
Right.
Right. And so they did a deal, and they ended up, they didn't win, but they put it on the pole.
Okay.
So here is this Coca-Cola car racing at this Pepsi track. And on poles, so it was on all the covers of the newspapers,
Right.
and Preston was very happy.
Right.
And then they went to Sebring, and they did really well there. And then going to the next race, there's no more money for the sponsorship. But my dad was in one sense, he was really smart, because he felt that having a brand like Coca-Cola on your car would attract others.
Right.
Okay. And also he was cheap. And to relivery the car was like $5,000.
Right.
And I could get 2 sets of tires for $5,000.
So just kept it that way.
So he just left it.
Yeah.
Went on, did 5 more races, and then we're in Atlanta, at Road Atlanta. And this guy walks up, Ken Hill, I think his name was, and he says, where's the boss? And he's over there. And he says, I'm from Coca-Cola. And you really can't just have our brand all over your car. How did this even happen?
Right.
And my dad told him about, the Daytona thing. And he goes, okay, well, that's a bottler. That's not Coca-Cola corporate in, the rest of the United States. You got to take it off. And my dad says, well, I can't afford to take it off. And if you want to take it off, you got to give me some money to take it off, kind of thing. And anyway, they ended up hitting it off. And Ken said, come to our offices on Monday. And they did a deal for what ended up going on for, I think, 12 or 14 years.
Wow.
And was one of the longest running, certainly sports car sponsorships in the history of the sport. And carried on from 935s through multiple 962s. And some of the smaller stuff. We had the showroom stock team and all that stuff. So, so the Coca-Cola Porsche that's how that came about.
Yeah. And, still, some of them are around. I think I saw one at Monterey a couple of years ago,
Yep. Yeah. One just sold at auction for 1.3, I think, which is a solid number.
Yeah.
I wish I kept it. But well, I never owned it, but, I wish we had kept it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. And what happened to Ralph Lauren? I mean, how did that happen? Why would you say no?
Ralph Lauren, my dad didn't know him.
Okay. He's a big car guy, though.
Big car guy. Not as much then.
Okay.
But Ralph was launching a sunglasses line, which they hadn't ever done before. And he wanted to kind of stylize it after racing. It was the racing glass or something like that. And so somebody said to him, well, if you want to talk to somebody in sports car racing, you should call Bob Akin. So my dad had a number in his office that was kind of his private line. And that line only rang at his desk. And I don't think 20 people had that phone number, right? It was family, super close friends, whatever. And one day that phone rings and my dad picks it up and says, hello. And there's this voice on the other end of the phone. And he says, Bob Akin, this is Ralph Lauren. And my dad immediately thinks it's one of his buddies.
Okay.
Somebody that would have this private line.
Right.
He really thought it was John Dinkle from Road and Track. That was a notorious prankster. And he was like, yeah, right. Okay. What can I do for you, Mr. Lauren, in a very condescending kind of way? And Ralph says, well, I'm calling because I want to sponsor your race car. My dad's like, all right, John, cut it out. I ain't got time for this. And hangs up. And the phone rings again and he picks it up and Ralph goes, I'm not sure what just happened there, but this really is Ralph Lauren. Mm-hmm. And if you want me to prove it, take down this number and call me back.
Right.
And hangs up.
Okay.
So my dad picks up the phone and dials the phone and it's Ralph Lauren corporate offices. Right. Mr. Lauren's office, please. Hold, please. Right to Ralph.
Right.
And they ended up doing a deal. And it was a big deal. They did a whole massive advertising campaign, mostly in print. And again, dating myself, but back then the New York Times Sunday magazine was like arguably the most expensive piece of real estate in publishing, that inside cover. And they did a Bruce Weber, very famous photographer. Yeah. Bruce Weber, they took over Daytona International Speedway. They did a 2-day photo shoot with Bruce Weber. Yeah. And all of that in the Coca-Cola 962 with Ralph Lauren on the top of the windscreen and on the side. And my dad was the actual guy in the photographs.
Oh, he was actually,
yeah. They didn't put a stunt double in, but it was an amazing thing, and we got to be pretty good friends with Ralph and Ricky, and I don't think we knew it at the time, but we had an old family place in Montauk Point, Long Island, and Ralph's house was a half a mile away. Wow. And so we ended up getting to be pretty good friends with the Laurens. And matter of fact, there was a big fire. You mentioned Ralph being a car guy. I mean, the cars he has they've been in the Smithsonian, I think, or the Museum of Art collections. But he kept about 60 cars in a garage out in Montauk, and there was a fire, a brush fire that was getting close. And so we got the emergency phone call, and like everybody we knew was showing up at Ralph's house, getting in cars and driving them to our house. And there was this picture of all these cars, because we had a circular driveway that went around our house, of all the cars that were all Ralph's stacked up like cordwood around our house, which was kind of cool.
Oh man. You have any photos of that?
I do. I don't know where they are, but I'll find them one day.
Oh man, that's pretty funny. How do you envision the role of like media and evolving in motorsports now? You've been in motorsports all your life, and there's a lot of innovation happening these days in media. There's streaming, social media, obviously, and creators on every platform you can think of. What's the role here?
Oh, man, that's if I knew the answer to that question, I'd be a much wealthier human than I am. Look, I think it's I think the social media has really captivated the world, right? And there's no doubt that that is going to be kind of a bigger and bigger piece of the marketing landscape and creators landscape. I just worked on a piece with Riley Harper, who's just an amazing guy and creator, and when I look at what Riley's doing on his Instagram and other platforms, it's just spectacular, and continues to just get better and better, right? And so I think that's going to be a huge piece. I do think you're starting to see a bit of a shift in storytelling, where 2 years ago ish, like YouTube, we want 90 seconds, we want 2 minutes. Anything else is too long. Yeah. That's shifting and getting longer. If it's true storytelling, you're seeing much longer pieces now,
45 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And almost more broadcast,
Yeah.
right? And so I kind of think that yes, Reels and TikTok, things like that. You know, there's always going to be those quick hit things, and it's great. I find myself getting addicted to it. You know, but when it comes to storytelling, I really do see that shift is going to get more serious, and people, when people get involved into content and consuming it, and it's good, right? They want it. They want more. They don't want less, right? And I think that's where, you know, I don't want to say the future, because I think it's already here, but I think that's going to become more and more prevalent with creators and storytellers. And by the way, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
That ability to have a story arc and come up with kind of interesting ways to do that. Just that's what I love doing.
Yeah.
And I think the pendulum is swinging in that direction.
Yeah. That's, I feel that way too. YouTube is becoming more of a long form platform now. And I was actually listening to a podcast of this creator, and he was saying that when his fans recognize him and they go, "Hey, I know you from YouTube," they seem to engage more and know a lot about him and seem to ask like questions about, you know, his content or creations or his life. But if they say, "Hey, I know you from TikTok," because he's on both platforms,
right?
The TikTok folks are mostly like, "Oh, you're the TikTok guy," and that's it, right? It's like
they don't
really know him that well. They just like kind of recognize his face.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So it depends on what your shtick is too. Yeah. But you know, if storytelling is what you're trying to do, I just think that it's getting more and more into deeper, longer, more effective storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, ultimately what we're trying to do here, right? Is tell stories, whether it's about a driver or a brand or a car, you know, a person. That's what, you know, as human beings, that's what we levitate towards, these stories.
Yeah, I think the car story, in not every case, you know, because you do get your, you know, very stat oriented car story, you know, right? You know, where it's got this much horsepower and this kind of brakes and da. But I think so much of automotive storytelling isn't about the automotive; it's about the people, right? And when I look at the Dempsey project that we're just wrapping up now, right? Again, it's when I watch it, yeah, I'm a Porsche guy. I love racing. I love all that stuff. But to me, it's that story of Patrick coming back, not just because of the racing, but because of the camaraderie, because of the friendships, because of missing so much of that.
Yeah.
And literally in front of my eyes, watching that come to life with Pat Long and Tanner, that it was just magic, right? And so I think that you can't do that in 30 seconds, you know, right? You just can't.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, for creators, when you are telling those stories in those longer form pieces, when you're shooting it and when you're planning it, making sure that, you know, you want to mine that content, right? And get the TikTok video and get the Reels video and not just have it be a cut down of the long form.
Yeah.
You want it to be purpose driven for that platform.
Right.
And so when we were shooting all of the Dempsey stuff, we were doing that with the lens of, all right, we know we're going to do a reel. We know we're going to do Instagram. We know we're going to do, these other platforms, and it's got to be done in a way that works for that platform.
Yeah. Yes. Platform specific content.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. In Japan, we like to say like, some static object like a machine or I don't know, piece of clothing or whatever. It's only an object until there's a story attached to it, right? So even like a car, it's until someone drives it and someone owns it and someone hears it and becomes part of someone's life, then you sort of like injects like a spirit onto it, and
100%.
And it's more than just an object now, right?
Yeah, I mean, personal stories, and people may find this not that exciting, but what happened to me a number of years ago. So we talked about that 962 that my dad had, and it was the second Porsche 962 delivered to the U.S. And it debuted at Charlotte, then it raced for a year, and then we went back to Charlotte. And my dad had an almighty accident at Charlotte. John Paul Jr., who was big driver at the time, went off on the infield, and basically my dad just didn't even see him coming, and had a big accident. Car completely destroyed. How my dad walked away is a miracle. And my dad then had the rest of the season. That was only like the third or fourth race of the season to go. And he needed a new car, or at least a new tub. Right. And Porsche was going to charge him an arm and a leg for a new tub. And my dad basically said, well, if you're going to do that, I'll just build my own. I got a really good guy. Yeah. And Porsche didn't want him to do that. So they ended up doing a deal. They bought the wrecked car for basically the price of a new tub. It was an accounting exercise, and we were up and running again for the next race. So that car that got wrecked ended up being, literally they bolted 2x4s to the front of it and made it into a show car for the New York Auto Show. I know, because I went to the New York Auto Show that year, and I looked under the door and I saw the chassis plate, and I was like, yeah, that's our car. And literally 2x4s, it wouldn't roll, it wouldn't do anything.
Right.
And it was painted in Lowenbrow colors. So 20 something years go by, my dad's gone, and I haven't even thought of that car, it was gone. And I get a call. I'm sitting at my desk, and Rennsport 1 is going to happen. Okay. And I'm doing the production for Porsche on Rennsport 1. No, it wasn't Rennsport 1. I'm sorry. It was Rennsport 4. It was the first one at Laguna Seca. Okay. And I get this call from Kevin Jeanette. Kevin Jeanette is a longtime Porsche restoration guy, race team guy, been around forever. And he calls me and says, hey, Bobby, what are you doing for Rennsport? And I said, well, I'm producing the stuff for Fox Sports. And he goes, no, not that TV bullshit. What are you driving? And I said, I'm not driving anything, Kevin. I'm working. And he's like, well, how would you like to drive chassis 102? And I went, Kevin, the car is gone. The car was destroyed. It's, blah, blah, blah. You were there, 20 something years ago. And he said, we found it and we restored it better than new. Wow. And the guy who owns it wants you to be the first guy to drive it. Wow. A guy I didn't even know. Right. Christian Zugel. We've since become very good friends, but literally, I mean, again, human stories of the emotion of getting into that car was amazing. Yeah. And driving it and racing it and not wrecking it was something very, very special to me, and I'll have that for the rest of my life. Yeah. It was awesome.
No, that's a great story. Yeah. I can't imagine that moment, getting into that car and driving. I mean,
I think I was 14-ish, somewhere in there when my dad and I went to pick up that car. It was delivered by Lufthansa Air Freight because Porsche was late
Right.
getting it done. And, I remember we had a flatbed truck and we went to the warehouse district of
Right.
JFK International Airport. My dad had a wad of money in his pocket because everyone told him you had to pay off the guys at the docks to get anything done. But, we walked in and my dad handed him the paper, and this guy right out of Central Casting, sitting up on a big heavy guy with a beard and a cigar. And he looks at the paper and gets on his radio and he says, "Hey, Joey, bring out the race car." And so sure enough, we hear this, this engine of a forklift start up, and then around the corner comes this pallet with a race car. It was red because they had done it in red Gelco because we knew it was going to be a Coke car. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in a car. But that moment of getting in that car from the time I was 14, the first time I saw it, to probably 35 years later, whatever it was amazing.
Yeah. It's an awesome story, Bobby. All right. Last question. We ask all of our guests on the Creative Drive. What is your creative drive?
I think that I love the process. And I love being given a challenge, like I mentioned with the Dodge Hemi thing, give me a couple of tidbits of what you're looking for, and then let me come back, and then follow it through. Just that moment of, all right, here's my idea. They buy off on the idea, well, whatever the client is or whatever the network idea is. And then the process of going from ideation through production, through the edit, through everything, and seeing it come to life. Again, the people that you engage with throughout that process, whether that's, a PA, a grip, a director, whatever, there is this, kind of community that comes together when you do these things, depending on the scale.
Yeah.
And there is something about going through that process with those people and seeing that idea come to life. That's what makes me happy. That's what I get up and get excited about and want to be doing more every day. I am not the person that's really good at sitting at a desk, so when I'm creating and when I'm working, that's what keeps me excited and engaged. And so I guess that's my creative drive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. It's so rewarding when, I think there's two parts of that. I feel like it's very rewarding when I, meet with a client that's still talks about, I've done some content, pieces at GD Channel like 15 years ago. And I just met one of my old clients at Discount Tire at SEMA, and we're still talking about it and the awards we won. Right. And then, so that's super rewarding for me. And then, like you say, like just talking to the team that was part of the production, whether it's the, subject or the talent or the guys behind the camera, we're still, I can call them any one of them up and talk like, I just saw them yesterday. Right. Yeah. So you sort of like build these like bonds with the team that you have, right?
100%.
You do these projects with
100%. Yeah. That's what makes it worthwhile. And
yeah.
And look, there's a lot of nonsense, in any of these things, right? And things go wrong and problem solving and all that, but it's it's that process and going through it and coming out the other side. I mean, is great. I mean, the Dempsey thing was fraught with all kinds of stuff, but in the end, it came together pretty much exactly like I had kind of envisioned it would, and that makes me happy.
Awesome. Well, Bobby Akin, thanks so much for your time.
No, 100%.
Joining us on the podcast. It was great to talk to you, man.
Oh, thank you very much. Honored to be here. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Creative Drive, where we offer listeners a candid look into the minds of automotive creators and their journeys. The Creative Drive is available on all podcast platforms, and we have a bunch of awesome guests lined up for you guys, so please subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. If you're interested in partnering with us, or if you have any feedback, please email us at podcasts@racer.com. That's podcasts with an S @racer.com. The Creative Drive is produced by Racer Studios. Thanks to my producer, Molly Binks, creative director, George Tamayo, Brian Conzone, and it's edited by Andrew Snyder. I'm your host, Taro Koki. Thanks for watching again, and we'll see you soon.